Hello learners, today we are discussing a very important topic, that is soil and its formation. The topic is under the course MSD 012, that is Ecosystem and Natural Resources. Myself Dr. Deeksha Dave, working as a faculty Environmental Studies in School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies at Indira Gandhi National Open University. So learners, welcome to this session. First of all, let us see what the soil is and how do we define the soil. It is simply said that solid earth material that has been altered by physical, chemical and organic processes to support the plant life on it, to provide the substrate for the plant growth, that is the soil. Or in other words, we can say that the unconsolidated mineral or organic material on the immediate surface of the earth, that is the soil. Soil is vital for our living. It is an important part of the earth's crust which sustains life. When we talk about the importance of the soil, it must be realized that from pouring rain to glowing grain, it gives us innumerable benefits for the humankind. It is a medium for the plant growth, and that means agriculture happens on soil. It ensures our food security, and in other words, it ensures a healthy survival of us on this planet. It gives us oxygen through plants. So soil is vital as it provides life to the greens on this planet. Then it is an important habitat for soil microorganisms. From bacteria to fungi to macroorganisms, earthworms, beetles, it is a habitat for these organisms. There are various insects which give eggs on the soil and hatch them there. So without soil, even these microbes, they help to decompose the organic material, break down the complex material into simpler parts, and in this way also help in the biogeochemical cycling. Soil also helps in the efficient cycling of the different minerals and the nutrients because it houses those decomposers which are there on the soil. We give out carbon dioxide and that carbon dioxide is taken up by the plants, and in this way the starch formation takes place through the process of photosynthesis, which wouldn't have been possible had been there no soil or no soil organisms. Then soil also interestingly acts as a buffer against the pollutants. It absorbs so many types of pollutants. And you must also know, learners, that soil contains more carbon, much more than the terrestrial plants. So it also helps in the carbon sequestration. It helps in the water supply, purification, and it also helps to prevent floods because it acts as a sponge. It takes the plants with it, and therefore it prevents the occurrence of the floods at the various regions. Now what is pedology? It is the study of the soils. It is coming from the Greek word, that word is pedon, meaning soil or earth. So it is a discipline under soil sciences, and in pedology we study about the type of the soil, the formation of the soil, the factors responsible for the soil formation, the composition of the soil and the different types of soils which are there. So all these things are studied under pedology. Now first of all, let us know what is the soil comprised of. It does contain the biotic and the abiotic components. When we talk about the abiotic components, minerals constitute the main part of the soil. Around 45% of the soil is comprised of minerals, which are coming from obviously the parent rock material from where the soil has come. Then there is organic matter, and this organic matter may be either freshly prepared organic matter, we can say, which is coming from the fallen leaves of the trees, or it may be because of the dead remains of the animals, or it may be the humus, that is also part of the organic matter. Then soil air, soil water, they are there in the soil because of the atmospheric processes taking place. Now this is the generalization. However, the different types of soils have different composition. This composition of minerals having potassium, having calcium, having iron, aluminum, or having moisture in the soil, that may vary from soil to soil. So therefore, when the soil wets or dries, the composition of the water in it and the air in it also changes. Now, what are the factors which affect the formation of the soil? We know that the soil is made from the weathering of the rocks, and number one factor which influences the formation of the soil is parent rock. That is the rock from whose weathering will ultimately form the soil. Now, these rocks are the agglomerates of different types of minerals. So, what happens is that, for example, if it is the sandstone, it will give the coarse soil. So, depending upon the parent rock, the composition and the nature and the type of the soil will vary. Second factor is the climate. So, as we were saying that the parent rock material influences the formation of the soil through maybe its color, mineral composition, texture, permeability, etc. Then climate is the another factor which affects the formation of the soil, and in climate, temperature and precipitation are the two most important determinants. Temperature determines the rate of decomposition, because at a high temperature the rate of decomposition increases, the microbial activity is more as compared to the regions which have colder climate. And similarly, the precipitation leads to the leaching of the soil. We will study about the leaching, that what is leaching and how does it occur. Then biota means the presence of plants, animals and microorganisms. It also influences the formation of the soil, because right from the microorganisms to human beings, every organism influences the formation of the soil. Bacteria help in the decomposition of the soil. Then there is a plant and the animal activity. It produces the humic acid which accelerates the formation of soil through weathering. Plants normally protect the soil from erosion, but on the other hand, animals increase the erosion of the soil. So in this way, the presence of the plants and animals at a certain place also influence the formation of the soil. Then most importantly, we have seen that how relief or topography of a region influences the formation of the soil. For example, if there is a slopy region, the soil particles tended to stay there for a very less period of time, because most of the times they are carried away by the action of water or wind. So, it has been seen that in the slopy terrains, the soil is thin basically, and with the increase in the angle of slope, the erosion also increases. In other words, it also influences the runoff, percolation, and also creates microclimatic conditions which are essential for the formation of the soil. Then if you consider the plain region, at that place we find that those areas or those regions have comparatively mature soils, thick soils, and generally in the older soils it has been found, because the soil particles there, they stay at that particular place for a longer period of time, they are undisturbed for a longer period of time, and in this way those regions have got mature soil. And the last most important factor in the formation of the soil is time. Whether it is the climatic conditions, whether it is the temperature, precipitation, or you can say the weathering of the parent rock material, time plays a very important role. So therefore, we find that some soils are young, while on the other hand there are certain soils which are very old. So whatever the stages we have seen, whatever the factors we have discussed just now, time is very crucial. So if the weathering continues for a longer period of time, the nature of the soil is different. If the climatic conditions are different and remain stable for a very long period of time, the nature of the soil is different. So time plays a crucial role in the formation of the soil. So now, what is soil profile? We must have heard about the different layers of the soil. So when we talk about the soil profile, it is actually the vertical arrangement of the different layers of the soil. And these different layers have unique physical and chemical properties. They are denoted by different symbols mostly the letters, and soil classification, the different types of soils what we study is basically done on the basis of the soil profile or the different horizons that the soil has. Number one, that is at the top we have the O layer of the soil. This layer is rich in organic matter and it contains, for example, dust, decomposing leaves, litter, etc. This O horizon may be thin or thick and it is altogether absent in certain kinds of the soils. So, it is the layer on which we find that the fallen leaves are there, the dust particles are there, the different scraps which are thrown here and there, they are there, that is the O layer of the soil. Then we have the A layer which is called the topsoil. It is the most fertile part of the soil and it contains most of the minerals and the nutrients which are required for the plant growth. Now below this A layer, there is a E layer and E layer is the transitional zone between the layer A and the layer B. What happens in the E layer is that when there is an excess rainfall, the minerals move downward. So, this transitional layer actually contains those minerals which have been removed from the topmost layer and are going in the B layer. So, this layer is usually light in color because of the removal of the clays, organic matter, iron, aluminium, etc. In some soils, this layer is altogether missing, but generally in the older soils and forest soils, this E layer is very prominent. It is a zone of maximum leaching where alluviation takes place, and by alluviation we means that the translocation of the minerals from one layer to another. Then comes the layer B, which is also known as the subsoil. It is rich in minerals and it is a zone of maximum accumulation or alluviation because the minerals which have started moving from layer A eventually reach at the layer B. So, the minerals that have leached from layer A and through E, they enter the layer C. This is also known as the subsoil. Then we have the layer C, which is least affected and it contains the weathered rock material, that is the parent rock material. The weathered part of it are there in the C layer. It is normally unaffected by the soil formation processes, and the R layer is the bedrock, which we call. It is a mass of rock and such as granite, basalt, limestone, sandstone, and it forms the parent material for other types of the soils. So, how the soil is formed, that is the process, and weathering is the most important, or you can say the initial step in the formation of the soil. Now, this weathering may occur through physical weathering, chemical weathering or biological weathering. When the weathering is predominantly by the changes in temperature, by the changes in rainfall, it is the physical weathering. And when the weathering, or you can say weathering is what? The breaking down of the complex into simpler. The rock particles being broken down into smaller parts, this is the weathering. And chemical weathering involves the action of, for example, when it is oxygen, it will react with metals. If it is water, the hydrolysis will take place. If it is carbon dioxide, it will form certain acids. So, by the action of different chemicals, the weathering is taking place in chemical weathering. Then in the biological weathering, it is the action of the plants and the animals which make the humic acid because of the actions which are being done by the plants and animals, and the activity of microorganisms also comes under the category of the biological weathering. Now, after weathering, the decomposition takes place. This is also one of the important step, you can say, which is responsible for the formation of the soil. It is the breaking of the complex living material or the dead plant or animal matter into simple organic constituents. It is carried out by enzymes, earthworms, mites and other organisms, and it also involves certain steps. Fragmentation starts the decomposition process when the bigger ones are broken down into smaller particles. Then catabolism takes place, humification occurs, and then mineralization, by virtue of which the plants are able to take the minerals from the soil, that is the mineralization process taking place. So, after decomposition, beginning from the weathering, the other steps are, like for example, there are two types of humus which we must remember. There is a mull humus and moor humus, and mull humus develops at a stage where soil microbial activity is very much, and it generally happens at the regions where the older soils are formed. Then moor humus occurs in the soil that has less microbial activity, and because of which it is a kind of a raw humus which we commonly call it as. Leaching is one of the important processes in soil formation, and whenever there is an excess rainfall taking place, the minerals or the nutrients move from upper layer to lower layer, and there is a downward movement happening. This is known as the leaching, and at this time what is happening, the soluble minerals are dissolved in water and those insoluble remain on the surface. Now, because of which the acidic soils are formed, because whenever the leaching process is taking place, what happens is that the cations, the displacement of the cations takes place, and the acid forming cations are remaining on the surface, while on the other hand the base forming cations are soluble in water. So, when rainfall is taking place, the base forming cations dissolve in water, and these include calcium, sodium, etc. They get dissolved, and ions such as hydrogen, which are acid forming cations, they remain on the surface, and because of which the soils become acidic because of the presence of too much of the acid forming cations remaining on the surface. Now, continuous leaching, if it occurs, it leads to the deprivation of the minerals in the soil. Now, there are two types of soils, and it happens because leaching process may take place in the hot humid conditions and the cold humid conditions. Now, lattice soils are formed where the leaching is taking place in the hot humid conditions. Now, at these regions what happens is that the silica particles basically they move downwards, but iron, aluminium, these minerals remain in the top. So, what they are not moving downwards, and because of which the bluish colored soil is formed, and those soils are known as lattice soils. On the other hand, the podzols are the soils which are formed in the regions where the conditions are cold humid, and in these regions the iron and the aluminium move downward, whereas on the other hand the silicates remain on the upper surfaces. Because of the presence of these silicates, the soil color is greyish, and these are known as the podzols. So, leaching leads to the formation of the different conditions, different types of soil formation. Then we have the capillary action or calcification, which is just reverse of the leaching processes, because here the minerals are moving from downward to upward, and it generally happens in the dry areas, the arid regions where the rainfall is very less. So, when the evaporation exceeds precipitation, minerals move upwards within the soil profile by the capillary action, and this is therefore the reverse of the leaching process, and this is also known as calcification. Then there is a salinization, means whenever there is temporary excess water on the fields or on the soil and the extreme evaporation is taking place, it leads to the deposition of the salts on the surface. It generally happens at those places where the irrigation is being carried out without the proper drainage system. So, when irrigation is done and there is no drainage, the excess water gets accumulated on the surface and salinization of the soils takes place. The problem is acute in various regions of the country. Now, there are different properties of the soil which we must know: the soil color, soil texture, soil structure, and soil organic matter. Soil color is the amount of the organic matter and the iron that is present in the soil, and it determines the color of the soil. And soil color is an important parameter because till today we say that there is a red soil or the black soil, and therefore the color of the soil gives a lot of information about the physical and the chemical properties of the soil. So, well aerated and poorly drained soils are rich brown in color, while on the other hand the poorly drained soil which develop under anaerobic conditions are grey or bluish grey in color. Then there is a lithochromic color and pedochromic color. associated with the soil color. If it is a lithochromic color, means we say that the soil has got this color because of the influence of the parent material from which the soil is developed. For example, sandstone gives red color to the soil. Then there is the pedochromic color, means the soils have got the color as a result of the soil formation process, and there may be the action of different processes of the soil which are taking place, and because of the which the color of the soil may change. Another important property is soil texture, which tells us about the distribution of different size of minerals present in the soil. So it is actually the different composition of the sand, silt, clay, loam, etc. in the soil, and soil texture influences the permeability, and it generally decreases with decreasing soil particles, and we say that sand particles have 2 millimeter size, and as compared to the clay matter where these particles have less than 0.5 millimeter. So depending on this, we can say that the soil texture varies from one place to another, and with the soil texture properties we can tell about the permeability of the soil, water retention capacity of the soil, and in this way the vegetation at that particular soil is also influenced. Then soil structure is arrangement of the different soil particles. How the soil particles are arranged? When individual soil particles may take the shape of the column, prism, platy. So these are the different types of the soil structures which are generally seen, and when they are more bindly together, when the neighboring particles, it also hampers the soil water absorbing capacity of the soil. So aggregate stability is very important to avoid disturbance which is caused by erosion or tillage. So the structure of the soil and the information about the structure of the soil helps us to make a better understanding about the functions of the soil and how the erosion and the tillage activities disturb the soil properties. So soil structure is also one of the important property of the soil which gives us a lot of information. Then organic matter is one of the important constituent, and it is the plant, animal or the microbial residues in various states of decomposition, and the primary parts of the organic matter are the fresh plant residues and small living organisms, and the decomposing organic matter, and the amount of soil organic matter determines the productivity of the agricultural land. And nowadays what we are seeing is that because of application of too many chemical fertilizers on the soil, the organic matter of the soil may reduce, and the presence of chemicals in the soil may make the soil barren or unfertile for long term use. So it is important to think about the soil, and so every year on December 5th we celebrate the World Soil Day to bring people's focus and attention on this very important vital resource, because it is necessary to have healthy soil for sustainable management of the land as well as the soil resources. Thank you so much once again. Thank you.